We are back. Another semester of Newhouse Afternoon here on this Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Nico Horning, Max Gifford, and look who it is. We have a third person.
Welcome in.
Third
Hi,
person joining the
everyone.
show. It's Dylan
Yes.
Byer, everyone. Let's clap it up a little bit for Dylan.
Thank you. I'm going to give myself some applause.
All right.
We're really excited to have Dylan on here for another year of Newhouse Afternoon. We're going to be talking some Syracuse sports today as well as some pro sports as well. And without further ado, let's kick it off a little bit from this past weekend when Syracuse ended up losing to Stanford 26-24. Obviously a very tough ending of the few minutes there in the game in the Dome, especially with a packed 40,000 people in there as well. It was frustrating, but there were some takeaways from it. And to me, my overall takeaway is you got the loss over with early.
It seems like the loss only gets earlier every single year. Flashback to our freshman year.
Our freshman year
They go
was something
6
else.
6-0.
6-0.
Should have gone 7-0 if Elijah Fuentes-Cundiff doesn't push the Clemson player or push the Clemson player.
We can't reflect
True.
on those times.
But then the year after, you go 3-0 going into Clemson like, once again, and you lose. But this year, you get the loss done in the third game. So it just seems like reality is setting in earlier and earlier every single season.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, we're starting the show off, might as well start it off on a hot take. I think this was a perfect time for Syracuse to lose. If they were going to lose one, I think this is the game
How so?
that they should lose. Well, think about it, guys. Syracuse has not had to overcome any adversity since Fran Brown became the head coach. It's Fran Brown became the head coach. Excitement. Training camp starts. Summer goes great. You win your first two games. They're on this high. So now it's you lose. So now it's the time for Fran Brown to show why he's the new head coach. It's why Kyle McCord came here. Now your players go through adversity. Now when is the time fans should be excited to see this team take the field?
I'd push back on that just a little because there was a few growing pains in that first game against Ohio. Syracuse especially had an inability to stop the run. And in the second game, that improved a ton. So I think you saw that Fran Brown can make in-game adjustments from game to game. So I think that was something good to see. But I guess in terms of the grand scheme of the season, yeah, I guess this was a good time for them to get their loss.
I'm totally with Dylan on the fact that it's good that the loss came now in the season, I think, versus later on when maybe there's an opponent that you shouldn't lose to, that you do lose to. Maybe some people thought that they'd go undefeated until the Miami game. Max, I know, is one of them. He's looking right at me.
No.
Okay.
No. I never said that. But to your point,
Sure.
would you rather have had your hopes and dreams broken in that Stanford game or in the Miami game?
Stanford.
I'd say Stanford.
But
I'd say Stanford.
I don't know, because I guess then if you're undefeated up until then, you're in the play. I mean, you're obviously ranked top 12. You have to be undefeated until the last game.
Potentially, but the ACC is still pretty competitive. So I don't know if they lose that game, if they still make the ACC championship game.
Good point. Boy, we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't
We
know
are.
why we're
Okay,
talking about
to
this.
what Dylan said
Those
a couple
hopes
of
are
minutes ago. To what Dylan said a couple of minutes ago about Coach Brown not having to face adversity yet. I thought the fact that you have a ranked team coming in here to the Dome on week 2 is adversity in itself. Look, I know some people didn't think that Georgia Tech should be ranked.
Yeah, I think that's where Max and I disagree with you.
But he beat a ranked opponent right off the bat in the season.
Okay, well, Northern Illinois was also ranked for like the longest time this season because
But Georgia
they
Tech's
beat
still
Notre
a good
Dame.
team. Georgia Tech is still a good team.
Georgia Tech is a great team, but I don't know if I call that adversity, because you're not coming back from anything.
Okay. If that's where you're going with this, I totally agree. Yes.
And I think I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but Holy Cross is this weekend. That's a perfect opportunity for this team. Holy Cross has struggled. They just lost to Yale last weekend. But focusing on this game, there was a lot of good things that I saw, and I think Fran Brown pointed that out in his press conference. Maybe it was a couple bad play calls on his part. Kyle McCord had 2 interceptions. But where is LaQuinn Allen and Dan Villari? Those are the 2 guys that coming into the season, I think we all thought were going to be your top tight end and your top running back. No touchdowns for either guys this season yet.
Well, I think we tend to forget that Syracuse was 1 play away from being 3-0. If that conversion on 4th and 9 when Alec Ironmatter makes that catch, I mean, we're looking at a 3-0 record right now.
You're putting the game based on 1 play? You're saying they lost the game because of 1 play?
I'm saying that they were 1 play away from winning, objectively.
Okay.
But to your point, because Syracuse has not used LaQuinn Allen so much, and they only had 26 rushing yards in the game, you can't expect to win football games like that.
No.
So I think it was probably good that Syracuse lost because it's a rude awakening. Like, hey, you can't just win by having McCord pass the ball all the time. Because I don't think Kyle McCord, he made some mistakes this game, but I do not think all the onus is on Kyle McCord.
No.
Not at all. I mean, you need more layers in your offense than just Kyle McCord and the wide receivers, which is one thing in one area that I think is actually really improved this year. Because coming into the season, I was like, Gadsden's going to be your guy. Who else would step up? We've seen multiple guys step up, whether it's Trevor Pena, Umari Hatcher. There's been multiple receivers around that. Now you have to find your running game again. And I totally agree with you. Where is LeQuint Allen? I mean, he had a decent first game where he almost got 100 yards rushing, but then since then he's kind of stalled out a little bit. But my thing with LeQuint is, even though it doesn't show up on the stat sheet, his effort and some of his plays where he's even picking up a few more yards because he's moving his feet still or he's diving for that extra couple of yards, that's the effort that you may get frustrated with early if you're not producing on the stat sheet, but it doesn't stop you from playing as well as you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The LeQuint Allen is a great running back. Period, point blank. I say this every semester we have a show, that it's just your O-line is so undersized that they cannot create holes for LeQuint Allen to run.
But this has been the first time I think the O-line has underperformed because McCord.
Yes, but
I mean, there were times where McCord only had 2 seconds to get the ball out.
True, but you sound a lot like Fran Brown because in his post-game presser he said, "Well, I don't know if it's as much the size of our guys as it is the will of our guys. When you're lined up, O-line to O-lineman, it's who wants it more." Mm-hmm. And yes, I think that's a big part of it, but size has to come into play.
But you're talking about who wants it more. Fran Brown has also made it clear that LeQuint wants the ball. He said LeQuint wants the ball too much.
Then I'd like to see LeQuint run out routes.
But if you remember what he said last week about Allen's running game, it's the fact that the defense isn't always going to give what LeQuint wants, right? Sometimes you're going to have to focus on the passing game a little bit more because they're just stopping the run so much. I thought that the running game would be better against Stanford. That wasn't the case. They stopped LeQuint immediately. Some of that falls on the offensive line for sure, but it also falls on the offensive line for McCord's, pretty poor first half as well with the offense. The fact that the offense stayed in the game throughout the Stanford game, I think was because of the defense keeping them in it. Drive after drive, we saw the defense holding their ground, and it just seemed like the offense couldn't get over that hump. And then finally they take the lead in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, they have a chance to win. And then obviously disaster happened at the end. So I'm going to ask you guys, the second half, what was the key difference, whether it was defense or offense, to give Syracuse a chance, not even getting into the last few minutes of the game?
It's tough to say because I think overall it was a pretty ugly game for Syracuse, especially on the offensive end. But again, I go back to, you were one play away from potentially winning this game and being 3-0. So I don't say the offense necessarily, stalled out. I think in that first half, they especially stalled out. In the second half, they started to get it together. Had a lot of big plays that were made. I mean, one of the biggest ones, the Oronde Gadsden holding call that ended up getting called back. I mean, that was a pretty big momentum shifter.
There were a few penalties that just came on terrible times. It's not like I didn't think Syracuse had too many penalties. I just think they were really timely with
It's not quite
happened.
It's not quite Dino Babers levels.
No, that's what I'm saying.
That's why I was gonna almost disagree with you, but then I got a flashback to the Dino Babers coach.
Then you remember who the coach was before him. Yes.
Exactly. No hate to Dino Babers, just a lot of yellow flags.
A lot of penalties. I mean,
I was gonna say every other play, the yellow flag would fly.
Yep. So I was watching that game. There was still a few too many holding calls against this defense that I was seeing that I didn't like. That comes through the more games you play, the more times you practice. What really changed in the second half for Syracuse to be able to take that lead is the trust in Kyle McCord's arm. We love when LeQuint Allen tries to or does run the ball, but you don't have a Garrett Schrader here anymore. You have Kyle McCord who threw to Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean,
did you see Marvin Harrison Jr. tweeted at Kyle McCord?
Yes.
After that rushing touchdown, so that was the most athletic thing he's ever seen him do.
I was like, I can't lose a quarterback right now. Like, Kyle McCord is sacrificing his body, but I'd like to see a few more play calls with Kyle McCord's arm. We talked about it that we thought Oronde Gadsden was going to be your sole wide receiver.
You mean McCord's legs?
No.
Or arm?
I
You
mean
mean
arm.
okay,
I want
okay.
to see more play calls involving his arm and his arm strength because you don't just have Arandi Gatson anymore. You have Pena, Hatcher, Jackson Meeks. You have a lot of receivers who can go downfield. And I'm just sick and tired of the slant passes that get 5 to 7 yards. I'd like to see more shots downfield. I know we're not doing Hail Marys every time we get the ball, but I'd like to see Kyle McCord do some Kyle McCord things.
But how dangerous could that be in terms of those interception numbers going up potentially?
Yeah.
There's a risk in everything,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And also, I would say, kind of counter your argument about doing more passing plays. I mean, Syracuse has a 117th ranked is 117th ranked in rushing offense right now. So if you continue to go to McCord, that's all defenses are going to expect from there on out. Therefore, I think it becomes a lot easier to predict who's going to get the ball and where they're going to get the ball.
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent of you really just have LaQuint Allen in the backfield, and he's just trying to run up the middle every single time, and he can't break tackles right now from what I've seen. He's very capable of it. He's a great running back.
Well, Nixon looked good in those first couple of games.
Yeah, and I think he's great, and he's pushing LaQuint Allen to be better also. I just would like to see, I mean, and you're talking about McCord's arm, Dan Villari needs to get involved.
Yes, I think the focus is mainly on LaQuint Allen right now. Now,
Yeah.
I agree.
I think Villari had a good showing towards the end of last year, but yes, it'd be nice for him to get involved.
He has 1 reception for 4 yards through 3 games.
It's true, but look at the other places that you're getting performances from.
I've said this since freshman year. Syracuse needs a tight end. Like
They
where?
have Aranda Gadsden. They have Aranda Gadsden.
And I've said this since freshman year. Aranda Gadsden's a wide receiver. The way that he is built, when I look at Aranda Gadsden's build, that's a wide receiver build. Dan Villari is a tight end.
Well, even these last couple of games, he's been kind of used as a tight end because they're not targeting him at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to see Villari get targeted more.
All right, Dylan Byer wants more tight ends to be involved in Syracuse's offense going forward. Max thinks this team's going undefeated till Miami. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say it's impossible now.
Oh, my gosh. All right, Dylan Byer, Max Gifford, Nico Horning on our first show of Newhouse Afternoon. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, more Syracuse discussions. Where does this offense need to improve going forward? You're listening to Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.